Welcome back to Dirty Pretty 2025 edition, the space where we own our feelings, honor our experience, share unfiltered truths, and talk shit, all through a lens of love. Today's guest, Amanda Popovski, wants you to believe your power is your personal brand. As someone whose purpose is deeply rooted in action, Amanda wants you to know that the secret to your success rests in trusting your senses. A life and business coach who has bootstrapped her way to living her liberation. It took many starts and stops for this entrepreneur to awaken to aligned action. Pulled by abundance, clarity, and excitement, instead of pushed by guilt and shame, Amanda believes an activated presence is the pathway to prosperity, and she wants to help you manifest it. So come face your fatigue, remember your essence, consciously consider your capacity, and turn your starts and stops into a stable business that scales. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Amazing introduction. Loved it.
Oh, it's all you. And thank you. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So, one thing that I want to say to the people that are watching and listening right out the gate is I have known Amanda. And the way that I will say that I have known Amanda is in different versions of Amanda. And so, what I want to tell you about her is that she truly is what I would qualify as a true blue entrepreneur, somebody that comes into the landscape, tries their hand at it, and then realizes something for themselves and takes a step back and then returns. So, Amanda, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to give us a little bit more about what I just shared there. What is your, as I said in the introduction, which is also on your website, right? What is your interpretation or your view of the start and stops in your journey to entrepreneurialism?
Yes. Well, I got my first exposure to life coaching. I was doing a study abroad program for 3 weeks in Argentina because my major that I graduated with is Spanish. And I was in Argentina. I was having an amazing time. And the day before we left was Christmas Day. And my brother had given me a self-development book. And I was like, whatever, I'll just throw it in my luggage. I ended up getting the worst sunburn of my life on my back because I
Oh,
was so absorbed in this book and I forgot to put on sunscreen. So to me, that was the first sign of like, I'm onto something here. Other people feel like they're made for more. They feel like life is juicy outside of the boxes, and I want to be a part of that. And so I started to investigate more about what coaching is, what these mindset concepts are. I went through a few different like mini coaching programs to just figure out what it was that I was so attracted to. And I
mhm.
ended up falling on this whole mindset idea that I loved. And where I am in the Northeast, as we talked about in Buffalo, New York, coaching is not very popular. That kind of mindset of like creating your reality, manifesting your life, it hasn't caught up here. And so when I was in college, when I was 19, when I was first exposed to coaching, I did have to kind of bootstrap it. I felt like very, um, I guess, naive. I say very sweetly because I just didn't know what I didn't know. And I was just like, rolling through these courses, meeting as many people as I could. I hired my own coach who really helped me make it happen. But as you were telling me in our pre-conversation, I guess I really did have to bootstrap it together. I didn't take any business courses. I was a liberal arts fanatic. I was like reading and doing Spanish. And this entrepreneurship was just kind of a download that came to me that I felt really passionate about.
Mm.
So I started my coaching business. It was just a very teeny tiny Instagram. I had one client for all of 2 years. I made like 200 bucks. And, I went to actually drop out of school in order to pursue this full time. And it
Mhm.
didn't end up working out for a variety of reasons. One, I didn't have connection to my own way of taking action. And so I was so afraid of success. I was so scared of other people in Buffalo, like family, friends, their perception of me kind of being like this quack on the outskirts,
Ah,
that I just didn't like, I didn't end up following through. And so I had my own digital marketing agency for a little while. And then I went into corporate to study some more business because I didn't want to get an MBA.
Mhm.
And it was another travel experience. I guess I have all these insights when I travel, but I was it was my 25th birthday, and I woke up in San Francisco on my first ever like all expenses paid trip for an accounting smart class for corporate. And I swung my feet over the edge of the bed and I looked around and I was like, this isn't it. Like, I thought I wanted to travel on corporate dime. I thought I wanted to be like really respected by my peers and like channel that ambition into a corporate place. But
Mhm.
what I really want is to heal. I think I had a lot of healing to do from that first round of being a coach, from not letting other people's opinions stop me, to healing my family dynamics when I dropped out of school, to healing my own relationship with what I thought was possible and not being afraid anymore, and letting my faith guide me and my senses, like you said, my intuition guide me on this round. And one other thing is that when I stopped the first time, really up until this most recent coaching business that I've created, I was operating in a very short term kind of way. I was very instant gratification-y. And to look at me, you wouldn't think that because I was doing all the things. I was meditating, I was journaling, I was deleting social media off my phone, like all those different things. But what I craved for my life and what I wanted at that time was like snappy. I didn't want to be bored. I didn't want to be committed. I didn't want to settle. And so
Mhm.
this time around, it's been really important for me to have that long-term vision and to let that sense of instant gratification just kind of fall away. And I see it paralleled with my relationship with my partner, who I met when I was 24 and I knew was like my match. And I was like, frick, I really wanted to like travel and spend my 20s as a digital nomad. And, he's works for the town, so he's got to live in this small town for like 20 years. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. But now that I have this different relationship with action and with commitment, it's like, yes, I do want to be married to this business. I do want to be married to this man. I'm open to changes happening, but that sense of like marriage and like, okay, even when entrepreneurship doesn't feel good, I'm going to stick with it. That's been a
Mhm.
huge piece of my journey.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, when you had left school, I think that's when we met.
Mm,
I'm pretty sure that we met online for those that are listening and watching. I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Pittsburgh. So no, it wasn't like we met in person. We had met online. And Amanda had asked me prior to us hitting record, why I wanted to have her on Dirty Pretty. And I had shared with her that because, first of all, she reached out to me to say, hey, like, I want to be on your podcast. I am back in this space. And I just thought that was so courageous. And I also thought it was so vulnerable. I felt very honored to be able to receive your vulnerability because I love people that just go out and are like, that's mine. I love that, right? Because, Randy Pausch, who is an author, he wrote a book called The Last Lecture, which is one of my most favorite books. If you haven't read it, please read it. It'll change your life. I promise you it will. And if not, you can yell at me. That's fine. But he has a concept you won't know if you don't ask, right? Like, so what they say no to you. So what? Like, you're not asking them for their approval. You're asking for your soul to be fed.
mm,
You're following that intuition, you're following that instinct. And that is greater than the fear of having whatever comes at you, right? And that to me is kind of like jumping out of a plane. You're aware the consequence could be grave, literally in a grave. It could be very grave. However, the adrenaline, the appeal, the invigoration of being alive, obviously jumping out of planes and things appeals to me. I'm not afraid of heights, right? It's worth it. It's worth it. And so that is why I wanted to have Amanda on this podcast because in Dirty Pretty, we talk about the things that are great and we love, but we also talk about the things that are hard, both being human on the spectrum of life. And so I thought it was really brave and honorable because I think entrepreneurialism is over romanticized and over glorified. And it's like, oh, you don't understand. You work for yourself. You're just at home in your jams. And it's like, yeah. And I got up at 6 and I went to bed at midnight the night before sometimes, right? And now I'm up again till midnight. And there's, not saying that that has to be the rubric, but sometimes it is. Right? Sometimes when you're in a marriage and your partner is sick, you're up all hours of the night because you want to make sure they're okay, right? That's the level of commitment that the entrepreneurism requires. However, just like love and marriage and any commitment, the relationship evolves as you evolve. And sometimes people evolve out of love. They evolve out of commitment. They realize that the long-term commitment actually turned out to be a short-term commitment, right? And so I really appreciate you being willing to come on and air this honesty that entrepreneurialism often requires you to be reinventive. Because
Mhm.
as you grow, because you are running your business is going to change because it's a reflective of the capacity of where you're at, what you're offering, and what you're excited about. So the thing I wanted to ask you is when your brother gave you this mindset book, was that the first exposure? Because I know you had Jen Sincero on your website. You had a quote from her. And what is it? Anais, I saw that quote too, the last thing. So these are very mindset driven people, right? So was that the first exposure you had to the concept of personal development?
Absolutely. Like the very first, maybe I had seen it and like had felt this indigo child kind of vibe when I read quotes like that, but I never put the pieces together that it was part of a curriculum that was different from what I was taught in school. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, yes, it makes sense to me. But for those that are listening, tell them what you mean when you say it was part of a curriculum.
Mm. Oh, so good. Okay. So, what I mean when I say that is that we are given the tools to be successful as um, civilians, as functioning humans, as people who remember history and try not to repeat it, as people who can do math and balance a checkbook and maybe learn a little something about English from the greats. But what we're not taught is the methods that we can use to really achieve our goals and do things that we never thought were possible for us, to essentially manifest, to use our conscious minds and our subconscious minds, to apply psychology and intuition and the body and wisdom of the ages to what we want to do. So
Mhm.
we're kind of like, funneled through this career path of school and then college and then a job. And I had always felt a little bit squirmy about that, I think, even before I turned 19, of like these boxes that felt very like, I don't want to be like the people that I see around me who, they go to work and they say that their job sucks. And then they come home and then they kind of like watch TV or they don't live a very nourishing or invigorating life. And I never wanted that for myself. So, this curriculum is the idea that there is a whole breadth of knowledge that we can access. Not only tools like yoga and meditation and breath work and Reiki, but also like the education of how to use our minds
Mhm.
consciously, unconsciously, how to use our passions, how to channel our intuition and our senses into something beautiful. And not only that, but how to use our bodies as a guidepost. Because I talk about in one of my programs, the Manifestation Mini Course, I talk about how a lot of what we see in society is normal, but it's not necessarily natural. So,
Mhm.
like all the sugar that we eat, speeding down the highway, all of the screen exposure, right? That stuff is normal in our society, but it's not necessarily how we are naturally intended to live in the state of hyperactivity and awareness that we're naturally meant to be in. So
Mhm.
that curriculum is like pulling back what is normal and helping you live what feels natural to you and what feels exciting, even if it's scary.
Yeah, I hear normal with air quotes, right? Normal. And I also hear what you're talking about in these boxes, social norms, right? In your what I hear you saying is it felt too suffocating and it felt too limiting and it felt too rigid and it was two and two and two and two. And I relate to that, right? That is what I say as well, right? The rigidity of society does not have to be the way in which you operate, right? You can be totally outside of the box. And for some people, there's rigidity outside of the box, right? So, in terms of this curriculum, which I really appreciate you expanding upon that, using your body, I call it as like a tuning fork. You're a human tuning fork, constantly just attuning, and not only constantly attuning, but constantly attuning in every moment of every second of every life, and that is a lot,
Mm.
right? You are having a conversation with a stranger at the grocery store and you're like, yes, and nice, and da da da. And then you come home and your partner is like, oh my gosh, this blew up. And you're like, what the fuck? And you're tuning, you're
Yes.
tuning, you're tuning, you're tuning, you're tuning, right? So, in terms of this curriculum that you define as attunement, I'm just going to say, right? Attunement to who you are, aligned action, as we said in the introduction. What was the difference that you can distinguish? And this is me putting you on the spot. I realize that. So, right, no perfect answer, just your answer, right? What is the difference that you can distinguish for the way that you would describe that you were operating in a curriculum before you got the mindset development book and now?
Mm. The words good girl come to my mind. Very obedient, very loyal, very um my family has always said that I have a very strong moral compass. So like if the instructions on our test was to flip the paper over when you're done and put your pencil down, I would do it. And I would start to get anxious when I noticed that someone else didn't do that and they were just kind of like twirling their hair or whatever. Very rigid, like you said. But you, again, you wouldn't think it, and I wouldn't have necessarily defined it that way without the gift of knowledge. I would have said, I would say that before, like my first exposure to coaching and mindset, yes, I was very, um, I was so self-conscious. I was very hard on myself. I was attuning to the curriculum of the female experience in a lot of ways. The toxic feminine of picking yourself apart, putting yourself on, like throwing yourself in front of other people, vying for other people's attention and validation. And I really felt a deep, deep sense of loneliness and confusion in myself because
Mm,
I did feel this potential and this passion and this idea that this cannot be all that there is. But I didn't have the words or the people or the examples to show me that it didn't just have to be this for 60 years. So I think that that curriculum before is ironically enough like where I still find a lot of my clients, and I don't think that's a coincidence that they're in this place of like hesitation and
yeah.
um, contraction within themselves. Even if they're fully functioning badass adults, there's still that piece of them that's like yearning for this internal self belief.
Mhm.
And when I came across that mindset book, I think the reason I was so absorbed is because I saw that there was this different way. There was this access to this curriculum and that I really could be as special as I always felt that I was. I really could be the version of Amanda that I would think of and be like, no, I couldn't do that, or like I'm too this, or I'm not this enough. And it felt like a door opened for me to be able to channel that I want that energy that you talked about and
Mhm.
apply it to what I wanted and not just like what I thought would be a smart decision or what I thought would be an acceptable decision. And
Mhm.
I love your question because I'm just loving the insights that I'm getting from them so much. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for that honesty. I really I relate to everything that you said.
Mm.
And one of the things that always fascinates me, and I don't know, I think I'm gonna have to do some sort of psychological case study at some point because it just is eating away at me at this point, is the feeling that some people have, right? Because you can ask people if they have that sensation, do you feel that you're destined for something that is outside of your immediate purview? And so, what I mean by that is, I am a mystical individual who grew up in an unmystical environment. And it took me realizing that by doing the things that you did. I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm just phoning it in. I'm just phoning it in. And I have a great life and I am unfucking happy. And I felt so ungrateful. And I didn't like that because, like you said, I am a very gratitude driven person, right? I love being with people. It's an honor for me to be with people because I just love people. I'm like, ooh, let me like peer into your soul. I'm so excited. What are you like? What's your style, right? Because like you're saying about this question, the more we are exposed to difference and nuance, the more we actually discover more of ourselves. And I think that we resist the resistance because we don't want the discomfort. And so when you got to the place of the door has opened, I'm not going to endure this like inner exile of being disassociated from my truth and doubting every single guttural instinct that I have for the sake of norms. So this door opens, you walk through it, and you're like, I'm going to start this business. How was it for you when you shut the business down?
Ooh, that moment, those like 3 days are the main thing that I had to get over to start this current coaching business, the main thing I had to heal
Yeah.
because it was so devastating. It was very egoic. It was like everyone watched me fail. Everyone I know
Mm.
has watched me because I was online, I was doing lives all the time, blah, blah, blah. And it was like I couldn't hack it. It was the feeling of I believed in myself and they didn't believe in me, and I'm going to show them. And I didn't show them, and they were right about me.
Mm.
And it was heartbreaking. It was so sad to like walk with my tail between my legs back into college campus and be like, I'm a student. When I really thought that I had put my stake in the ground and been like, I do not accept this life anymore.
Hmm.
So it was really, really tough at the time because it was so, um, it felt so much like a failure, like shame instead of guilt, you know? It just felt like me, Amanda. I had mistook myself for some flash in the pan piece of gold when I was just another piece of sand.
Oh, good God. That is so beautiful. And this is the dirty part of Dirty Pretty that I really relish and I really appreciate because, to all the things that you were saying before, I would truncate that for myself and translate it as humaning is hard.
Mm,
And we are not giving an instruction manual on how to human, let alone one that is specifically written for you, for me, right? Because there is no one size fits all in being a human being. So you have this instinct inside that says, I'm destined for greatness. And greatness is relative to the individual, right? So you have this I'm destined for greatness, which again, there are some people that don't. And I'm so curious about, like I said, I want to do a case study on do you not have that believability in yourself because it never occurred to you? Or do you not have that believability in yourself because it really truly is just undesirable to you? And in which case, beautiful discernment. You know yourself. Fuck it. I love that for you because it took me forever to get here. Right? So you have that realization of this was a failure in your words, right? Was there any reversion back to that version of you? Like you put yourself back in the box.
mm. Yes, I actually completely shut the box on mindset coaching, anything like that, wrote it off as like spiritual garbo and shoved it in the back of my soul. It was any time that I thought about that time period, thought about the concepts I was teaching and integrating, it was a total 180 back to obedience, back to seeking validation outside of myself. And I still felt like a badass because I had this digital marketing agency and I was a senior technical project manager. Like it still felt like I was checking all the boxes and still being impressive and special,
Mm-hmm.
but not in that really quiet, brave way that it takes for us to live our own truth, like you said. And so I totally reverted back and I felt like this dissatisfaction pop up and I would just shove it down. And I would see a book on my shelf that I read during that time that was super woo and spiritual and I would just like, oh, I can't even look at it. Like I'm
Yeah,
so
that's
much
bullshit.
smarter now or whatever. But yeah, it was really back to square one and with the added weight of like I could have done it, if I
Mhm.
just done this, that, or the other thing differently. So I
Yeah,
still
was
do a lot of these after. Go ahead.
no, thank you. I apologize. So was there any sense of, how do I say this? I could have done it better. Was there any sense of self-deprecation of I didn't do enough? I
Mm.
wasn't enough.
It was maybe, but it would have been hidden underneath a thing of like I fucked it all up. I did it all wrong. I ruined all these relationships. I put
Hmm.
myself into debt and for what? Like there's no results. And I think at the core of that, of like I failed, I fucked up, there's probably a regret. I was more upset and angry and hurt and distrustful of the universe and my intuition because everything felt right. Even the disillusion of my business, it felt right if I was honest to myself.
Right.
But I was still kind of like exporting the responsibility maybe and being
Mhm.
like, how could you do this to me? I had so much potential, like shouting at the moon, that kind of like really tough um, spiritual dark night of the soul kind of vibe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just hear like, Jim Carrey and Bruce Almighty, like, smite me, Almighty Smiter. Like, like, you hate me, I hate you back, double, right? Like that, I relate to that so hard because I had a very similar experience too after my father passed away. I shut everything down, all of it. And it was that feeling of, I can feel it in my bones that I'm supposed to do something like this, but apparently I'm doing it wrong. And so you revert back into that bubble of normalcy, rigidity, of here's the pattern of societal achievement and accreditation. Let me tack on more accreditations and more achievements to make myself feel good, right? Because I'm special, damn it, and I have to do some way to prove that I'm special. And so you go back into that little incubator and you lick your wounds. And you really do. You really look at your inner child that's like, but I believed so big. And my dream was so big. And I can feel it. I can smell it. I can taste it. It's in my molecules. And there is this internal exile, as I said before, of which you are fighting yourself and hating yourself for it. And I want to share this with the audience because I find that people feel like when they get to this rock bottom, and it is a rock bottom, that they are in some way unwell.
Mm.
And I think that it is with tremendous grace that we need to acknowledge that you do need to have grief. You do need to have sorrow, and you do need to look at what didn't work in the face. And sometimes it takes long. It took me 3 years. Took me 3 years to look it in the face. So you get to the point of looking yourself in the face, right? And you're in, as you said, the dark night of the soul journey. You're looking at everything that you've accumulated, knowledge, friendships, networking, clients, ideas, and otherwise. And you're saying, that's all bullshit. It didn't work. Fuck that. Fuck everything. I'm just going to go back into this little cage and operate there because that's safe. And it is. It is, right? It's how everybody knew you. It's how you knew you. Then something happens. Something happens in you that's like, this is fucking bullshit, right?
Yes.
Right? And this is the bootstrap moment, right? This is the moment where you have to pick yourself up and look yourself in your face, soul gaze into yourself, and ask yourself what you're made of. And the answer for you was what?
Bravery.
Mhm.
Like I said, my family and I had a tenuous relationship around the whole idea of me being a coach because it
Mm.
led to me dropping out of school, accumulating debt, things that aren't super accepted. And
They're
I
scary.
actually, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because they're scary, right?
Yeah,
They're scary and they want the best for you, right? Right.
nothing but love, nothing
Right.
but love. And I remember, I, oh, this makes me so happy. I remember that feeling when you're an intuitive person and when you're in tune, that feeling of like, I can fight this no longer. There's like a buzz, there's a brain like buzz that doesn't feel mean, it doesn't feel aggressive, but it's a strong pull. And it's like, it's now or never. You have to do this and you can't avoid it because then you start to get anxious and you start to get whatever. So I remember looking in my mirror after coming back from San Francisco and being like, I have to tell them. I have to tell them that this is what I want to do. And so I made this like Google Slides presentation of, hey guys, I know all of this happened. Here's all the things I've been thinking about. I promise I'm financially safe. Here's what I'm going to invest in. And I remember specifically like the people that I really loved and were close to had at one point when I was in college said like, Mandy, I can see your name in lights. Like I can really see this for you. Or if nobody understands, then they just don't see the vision, just get through your degree and that kind of stuff. And I remember sitting down in the living room and giving this presentation to my family and knowing that I was brave enough that even if they didn't approve, I would still go forward and I would still do this thing. And that was so huge. That was huge for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's making me emotional. And it makes me emotional because there's nothing more beautiful than seeing a person stand for themselves. And you didn't have a path paved forward. This is an unpaved path. That's what bootstrap means, right? And it takes tremendous courage. And there is a point, I love that you said there's something that happens in your brain. And as you're saying it, I'm like, it's like, to me, it was like my brain broke. My brain broke. And it was just like everything that doesn't work needs to be flushed out. And in a therapeutic sense, right, I will just share with those watching and listening, like, what's that like? It is the equivalent of a breakdown. When someone goes through that inner exile where you are at odds with yourself, it literally feels like a part of you is dying. When you aren't honoring your essence and you're not listening to your instinct, your light starts to go out. And you get to a point where you almost feel like in the dark night of the soul, and this is my explanation, everybody apply it for yourself, how it feels for you, but you literally feel like you're walking in the dark. You literally feel like there is no light inside of you. And to me, it's like you come to the crossroads of like, I'm dying. I'm dying living like this. And I've said it many times on this show. I've said it many times in other places. But you realize, well, it can't be any worse. If I fail and I die in that version of me, right? Again, in the business, like I did, like you did, like other people watching, I'm already dead. So I'd rather risk everything for myself and believe that I can fucking do it. And I know it's going to be hard than continue to live in a life where I know I am slowly but surely just wilting. Like the color is fading from you and
Mm.
you're no longer in Technicolor. You're in black and white, right? If you've ever seen Pleasantville, you're just in that version of the fembot or the Stepford wife. Like here I am doing all the things society told me to do. And do you like me, right? You're constantly continuing to seek that approval because you're following a standard that is not your own. So you get to this point where you're like, okay, you do the whole, I love that you did like a PowerPoint presentation. Cracks me the fuck up. I'm like, oh my God, that is something I would so fucking do. And I hear the project manager in you in that, right? Let me get all my ducks in a row. But I love nothing more that you were like, even if they disagree, I have to do this.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like, I hope at least they can respect that, right? That feeling of I'm gonna have to persevere if even if it's not popular, right? So you get to this point where you're like, okay, I'm going to go back in. I'm going to test my toe in this water. Is there a point where you begin to start to transmute all of that negativity that's in your mind that your brain broke over, that caused you to shut everything down, and you start to see perhaps the failures as not so much failures?
Yes, yes. And it took me relying on that steady stream of bravery to push me forward, to
Hmm.
allow me to get to a point where I had a launch party here in Buffalo and invited all my coworkers, my friends, my family. And
I love it.
I walked out to speak to them and share like my whole story and my whole truth. And I didn't feel nervous at all. I just felt so proud.
Hmm.
And it was in that moment, I think that things started to change. When I really claimed and owned, like, I am a life coach, even if I am 25, even if I am, super smart and good at project managing, whatever. And it was in that moment, like, that's where things started to pivot and where I started to even just infinitesimally respect the design of the universe and be like, okay, I see why I needed to go through those years away from this. I see
Hmm.
why I needed to see myself in that light. I see that my family was just loving me. I see that people see my vision, even if they can't understand. I see that people, because I know that I was made for more and I'm standing in that, I can feel that other people are starting to get with the program too. And so that
Yeah.
really was the turning point.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're Billie Jean Badass who's like, let me pave my own path. And then it requires a bump in the road for you to literally come back into yourself and realize that there were some things maybe out of integrity, some things that, weren't really fleshed out and clear to you about what your approach was. Like there was a rooting that needed to happen, is what I hear you saying, because it's what happened to me too. And I totally agree. There's a reconciliation and a reckoning with the fact that the universe doesn't care about what the fuck fair is. I don't care about fucking fair.
Oh,
That's what the humans made up. I am just about energy and flow and juxtaposition and hypocrisy and contradiction and inconsistency, and it's all over the fucking place. And for me, it was like if the universe can be all over the fucking place, then I fit right in. I fit right fucking in because I'm very inconsistent, right? And the fact that you allowed yourself to take that beat, which I want to just say for the listeners and the viewers that you don't have to take the path that Amanda and I are discussing. There are plenty of coaches and entrepreneurs who go through the bump while sustaining their business. But why do you think that you had to take the time out?
I had to get my shit rocked by the universe so that I could get my ego out of it. Because
Hmm.
at the time I was in college, I was
Yeah.
dropping out of school. I was very like Steve Jobs, like know, whatever other people dropped out of Harvard. I was like, I'm going to prove I'm special right now. And you can't say shit to me to tell me I'm not, because I'm going to make a bunch of money and I'm going to live my dream life and travel and do all the things I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so there was a part of me that was very intuitively guided and spiritual. And then there was the part of me that was super inflamed, like WWE fighter, like ready to fight people at any moment, myself included, who doubted that I could make six figures in my first year in business out of college. And I'm so glad that that happened, that I
Mm-hmm.
did digital marketing because it helps me so much now, that I did corporate stuff because it helps me so much now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really coming at this from a place of like, my faith and my purpose is so much bigger than my fears. Like that long-term vision that we talked about, getting that instant gratification out of the way, because I was still carrying some of that energy of like seeking other people's validation, of like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this coaching business because I'm better than you and I'm smarter than you and I took more risks than you and I'm going to go live my life, fuck off, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've learned so much about how to be authentic and genuine
Mm-hmm.
and know my value and know that I'm held without having to prove to anybody that I am valuable or
Mm-hmm.
that I do have something to offer or that I do live a dream life. Like I had visions of posting all these pictures on Instagram of me traveling to Greece and like living it up in my bikini. And that's okay if that's your vibe. But now I know the difference between keeping my private life private for me and sacred for me in my travels and what that means to me, and not just doing it in service of some image.
Yeah, and I also love what you said before. There was some shame around being a life coach, right? It's like, I'm a life coach. Like, yeah, I do that. I am for a living. Yeah, that's what I do. Right? I relate to that because it's still nuanced, right? And there's all sorts of different kinds of, I'll call categories and expertise in life coaching, right? But if you can't get behind what you're doing, then there's always going to be that part of you that's kind of stepping on your own tail, right? That's not letting you progress because you're like, even I don't know if I buy this shit, right? So you get to a place of reckoning with yourself. What was the difference that you noticed from the first time around in the approach of business to this time around? Not just from a place of, I felt more rooted in what I was doing. I knew my mission statement and my purpose, like all of that business stuff, because it is business stuff, but you're a person who runs a business. You're not, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a person that runs an entrepreneurial business, right? So what was the difference in you? What was the stability about you that felt different, like emotionally, mentally, that allowed you to have the fortitude that says, so what, I fucking failed. I'm going to fail forward this time.
Mm, mm, mm. The main difference was there were two really big things that happened in the years between my first and second coaching business. One is that I was diagnosed with PMDD, which is
Oh,
premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
yes, we've talked about yes.
Yes, which makes you feel
Crazy.
like a crazy person.
Sorry,
100%.
like crazy.
Yes, 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 yes. Exactly the words I was going to use.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And in the first go around, I didn't understand this about myself. I didn't clock that it was happening every month. I was like, I'm the greatest. And then, like, I'm going to fail, right? There was like that, like, to me, it felt like hysteria, which I hate
Oh,
that word, but and it felt like volatility and friction and just like, what is wrong with me? So if I wasn't succeeding in my business, it was like, that's because I'm psychotic and I can't get my shit under control. That was the first thing. Second thing would be my actual embodied knowledge, thanks to my coach that I work with now, of like an emotion cannot kill you. An uncomfortable emotion needs to be felt there are thoughts that create those emotions. When we can get to those thoughts, we can have compassion for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So PMDD and then learning about thought work, the model, life coaching tools, it allowed me to take a step back and actually separate Amanda Popovski, the brand, and like Mandy, someone who needs to tend to herself and who has the capacity to be compassionate and lead others in a way that allows them to get back to their own compassion and recognizing that this is cyclical and this too shall pass. Like that's the biggest thing probably when you say fortitude. It's the knowledge that up, down, whatever, this too shall pass, but you always want to be able to have your own back through it and
Mm-hmm.
find that good feeling in that relationship you have with yourself.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also have PMDD, so again, our overlap is crazy. And I really appreciate you giving a name to that. And I'm like, oh my God, we should have a whole fucking podcast just on PMDD because it is so misunderstood and so overlooked, and it is very, very tumultuous. And I just want to acknowledge you for being a business owner who functions with this level of disability because it is a disability, premenstrual dysphoria disorder, right? So it disables you. And I don't know what your symptoms are because there's a myriad of symptoms that you can have that are related to PMDD, but there's a certain level of symptoms you have to have in order to be diagnosed with PMDD. And so what I hear you saying is that there's a body mapping that you needed to do in order to understand how to align your business model to what Mandy can fucking actually do. And I'm like, Barry Manilow is playing in my head right now, Mandy. I'm like, oh my God, I just love that people call you Mandy.
Yes.
And I think that that's something that is so under addressed is that you have a capacity. And your capacity needs to be reflective of your business. Your business doesn't need to be the capacity that reflects you. It needs to be a top-down approach. You run the business and you have to decide how you can be functional in your business so that you can account for things like what are the nuances of my health? What if I get sick, right? There has to be some sense of self-understanding of what you're actually capable of, because if not, then you get into that neuroses where you're just spinning out of like, I hear you and I'm with you. And it took me the same thing of really digging in to understand that this is who I am for 2 weeks of the month. And then this is who I am for the next 2 weeks of the month. And I had to map out my business to say the 2 weeks where I'm functional, I'm on and popping. And the 2 weeks that I'm not, I need to be authentic with my audience and be in alignment and let them know that you're going to get a low level integration and engagement from me on those 2 weeks, right? And build your business model around that. And I think it's such an important conversation that needs to be had where I say to my entrepreneurial clients, how are you functioning your life inside of your business, right? Not how is your business running you? How are you running your business, right? And it has to be congruent with who you are and what you can sustain if you want to have a sustainable business. So you get to this point of what it sounds like is just an overall assessment of who are these two, I'm going to call them two things, you and your business, even though there's more to you, but you and your business and just you as a person. How do these things overlap? Where don't they overlap? As you talked about, I have a privacy in my travels and my family. I love that distinguishment and that discernment. So coming to all of this self-awareness, then how has that changed the way you approach business and what you do in your business?
Mm. Well, first, I want to comment on something that you said about your own business because I wanted to tell you this, but I'm glad I can tell it to the public that the way you run your business feels so good to my body. Even just being on like the receiving end. Like I reached out to you in maybe September. You responded in October, and that felt good. I wasn't like, oh, Shannon. And then you sent this podcast invitation for like, how's 2025? And I was like you just, it feels like you breathe. You just like breathe in your business. And that is something that I want to take with me too. It's so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That makes me emotional because it took me a while to get here, and that discernment was not what I had the first time around. So I appreciate that because a part of my business model is to have people living in their breath. I'm a yogi, I'm a certified yoga, I'm a breathwork certified, all that things. But because when I was who I was before, I never felt like I could breathe. And when I came into my being, that's the first thing I noticed is like, I remember saying to my therapist, I feel like I can breathe. And I know that sounds weird because I'm a human being, but I feel like I can breathe again. And I started doing research on that. And it is just your nervous system recalibrating and regulating and losing the tension and learning how to orient to, as we talked about before, moment to moment instead of trying to be this version of you that's performative all the time. So I really appreciate that because I think that it's important for people to acknowledge, even in the corporate world, and I come
Mm,
from a corporate background, that you can tell people to hold on, I will get back to you. And if they don't like it, then that's for them not to like because you have to lead with integrity. So thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot.
thank you for being an example. Feels
Thank
like so, so good.
you.
Okay, so your question was
Mhm.
about the difference between Amanda Popovski in business and then like Amanda Popovski the person and how they differ. Okay,
So
so
actually, let me drill it down, right? So like what you were doing in your business the first time, how is that different to what you're doing in the business now?
mm, okay, I take sacred pauses from my business, and it's so good. I would never, ever, ever even like think to not think or to take a breath or to relax. And now I am in tune with my body enough, and I'm sure you know the feeling of like, oh, I'm getting a little bit close to my energetic boundary here. Like
Yeah.
if I open my laptop right now, it's not going to be pretty. So I put
Hmm.
my laptop, I go to a cafe, I read a book, I go to the library, I hang out with my boyfriend, and I'm just like me. I don't even think about the business for a day, which is great. And
Yeah.
I have that luxury, I think on purpose, because I'm just kind of at the beginning, I don't have a book full of business or clients where I can take that time and just like really be with myself, which I think will be important when I do scale to that point, that I'll be able to build it slowly and not all at once. Because there have
Mhm.
been plenty of times where I've prayed for like, please, please, please send me full capacity. Like I just want to serve people, right? But it was more
Yeah.
an ego thing of like, I want to feel safe because I have a full book of business. Okay. And then, yeah, taking those sacred pauses has been huge. And something really big that I teach my clients and that I live with in myself is taking brave action, whether
Mhm.
that's big or small, in the way that feels good. And it took me learning about human design to really
Mhm.
like integrate that. I'm a generator. And so, are you a generator?
I'm a manifesting generator, but I
Oh,
was I was gonna ask you this question because I was like, I wonder if she's a generator. But keep going.
so I know that, like, I know the difference now in the texture in my body, in my mind, in my intuition, my soul, between when I'm pushing
Mhm.
and when I'm being pulled. Like you said, that's something I'm really big on. So just recently, I was kind of like, okay, what do I want to do for 2025, for quarter one? Do I want to run something, blah, blah, blah. And the mechanism inside was like, no, 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 no. Just relax right now. Like you don't have to strategize, you don't have to plan. And I am so I like what I'm seeing in my head is like a little baby like in a hammock swaying in the breeze. That's how I feel. Just being
Mhm.
so held and knowing that generators are workhorses. We have this golden energy within us that we need to protect. But when I'm on and when I feel that ping to move forward, I create and it's beautiful and I'm getting chills and it's like it all happens in alignment. So the two big things I would say that are different is my ability to pause and my ability to really like shut out everything that I think I should do and do
Mhm.
what feels really good. And it's not a perfect system. There are a lot of times when I catch myself in ego being like, well, I should post on Instagram or I should be doing more. Where are my people going to come from? But it's been such a blessing, this lesson of like just listen to your internal waves.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Something that I have learned in the past, I'll say the recent present, as in like 3 years, from the coaches that I've worked with, is the importance of aligning your business to your nervous system.
Mm.
And I hear that within your sacred pauses, right? These are non-negotiable moments for you, but they're not you slacking off. And there is an inner dialogue that I hear that had to have occurred in you to differentiate between this is me being lazy and procrastinating, and this is me nurturing myself so I have something to push forward and fuel myself when my generator light goes on, right? So I hear you developing a deeper sense of self-awareness and self-understanding, again, aligning to your specific needs and your specific wants. And it's so easy to get trapped up in hustle, right? I'm just putting that in quotations. And in the comparison game, particularly in social media, it's pervasive, it's prevalent, it's everywhere. And it is not, it doesn't escape any of us. I really don't think it does. But there's a difference between being down on yourself and self-deprecating when that ego voice is speaking and you saying, I know what you're doing, bitch. I know who you are. You have a different dialogue, right? And the dialogue is so wild because it's with you. Isn't that wild? I think it's so, and it's so special to develop that, what I call you're able to have an inner dialogue. Whereas before, when you're pushing and you're doing everything for external validation, the dialogue isn't with you. The dialogue is what's the world think is going to be okay? What's my mom and dad encouraging me to do to make them feel comfortable and safe? So I'm not ruffling feathers. So I want to thank you for naming that and putting that out there because I think that people do think that you have to drill yourself into the ground in order to be successful. And I can tell you as honestly and as blatantly as we are talking here, I know people that work 2 days a week and make six figures every six months. So it's really about aligning into your own essence, what I hear you talking about, and also understanding that we all have shadows. We all have parts of us that pop up and encourage us to act in certain ways that are not in integrity with us. And it's our duty to understand how to transmute that, to turn that around, right? Like I always say to people, one of my neuroses is that I can be a raging bitch and I can be the person that's like, you want me to check you? I will check you and it will be fine. And that part, I don't like that though. I don't like that. It makes me live with regret. It just doesn't feel right in my body. It gives me goosebumps the minute I do it in a bad way. But to transmute that and not just be like, well, I need to eradicate that bitch. If I throw that bitch out, I throw out my boundaries. I throw out the person that's like, this don't feel good and that's enough for me. So it's about transmuting that and turning that into an understanding of how does it work for me? Because that way don't work. And that's what I hear this whole conversation really kind of centering around is understanding how your body is encouraging you to move, but checking yourself to say, I understand this is what you're saying, but how does it work for me? So that actually in engaging it, it nurtures me at the same fucking time.
Yes. Yes. That's like the generator anthem right there. I love it.
I love that because generators are workhorses and manifesting generators for those that are watching, we are also workhorses, but we need something to respond to. And so when we are asked a question or we are invited to do something, our workhorse comes and I'll tell you about that shit all day long and is really excited to share about that shit, right? So thank you for bringing up. I feel like we have just traversed the spectrum of entrepreneurialism and integration and individuation and shadow work and God, such a plethora of topics in this conversation, not to mention and not to leave out PMDD and all of the nuances of our bodies that we have to honor so that we don't get burnt out. And so that we can take these sacred pauses that you're advocating and I'm advocating for here today and saying, just because you have a stutter step doesn't mean you can't pivot and get back in the dance, right?
Yeah. So well said.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I want to ask you though, what final thoughts would you like to add? Or something maybe you said before that you like to expand upon, or maybe just something generally you want people to walk away with from this conversation?
Something that your perceptive and precise and like deeply enriching questions have illuminated today is that I can take credit for more than just what I put on my resume or just what I put on my website or just what I message out to people, right? That there's a lot of badass living in these bones. And I really appreciate the way that you do that for your guests, for your audience. I'm trying to think of something that I want to expand on, but I really just feel so nourished and content from this conversation. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing because you are holding a torch for all of us to be like deeply embodied, integrated, and fierce. I love it.
Man, she's just moving me today. Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you so much for leaning in, right? It's one thing to ask a question, and it's another thing I love, even in this moment of conversation, when I ask you these questions, you're still honoring your sacred pauses. And I'm noticing that as you root into how can I really honor the question and myself by being as fully honest as I can be in this moment and open to actually what I'm choosing to be honest about, to illuminate it in yourself. So thank you for that. And thank you for, just being such a steward of heartfelt journeys and for other people to embrace that and to embrace their inner badass, right? Like, I don't care if you're a teacher, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, whatever it is, there is a badass to you that propels you every single day. And so thank you for embodying that, not only here in this conversation, but out in the world. Even in your sacred pauses, you're embodying, I'm a badass because I take a pause, right? That's integrity. So thank you for that. And in that lane, I'm sure people are listening to this. And if you're watching this and you're just picking up the exuberance and the radiance of Amanda, oh my God. It's like the gold, you said a golden, what did you say? It's like a golden charge in you, the generator, right? I can see it. I can see it. You're radiant in your lane. So, what do you have coming up, and where can these people get more of that golden glow you have?
Oh, thank you. So, my website is amandapopovski.com. It's kind of a Macedonian tongue twister, so you'll get the spelling probably from the description. Um, my Instagram is Amanda Popovski, and on LinkedIn, I post an email or like a little newsletter every week that I'm working on
Nice.
that I'd love for people to be a part of. The next thing that's coming up that I run a few different times a year is that manifestation mini course that I mentioned, where we
Beautiful.
all kind of get together for 2 weeks and we really focus our energy on manifesting and taking that badass brave action in community.
When is that coming up this year?
So
Do you have a
that'll be in February.
Thank you so much for being here, my friend. It is such an honor to be able to know you then and now, and to be able to witness the depth that you have embraced in yourself and have the ability to now to encourage and share with other people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And likewise, you're the best.
Oh, thank you. And you listening and or watching, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. As always, be good to yourself for fuck's sake. Live honestly in the dirty pretty of your life and choose to do the next right thing for you. Have a good week. Bye.